Well, good morning, everybody. It's great to see you all. Shannon and I are super excited to continue our conversation on crisis leadership. These are brief conversations, 15 to 20 minutes, so we can all get on with our day. Last week, we talked about thriving in uncertainty. And I'm very pleased that we're joined again now by one of my colleagues who's a peacekeeper in the Golan Heights. I look forward to serving with you. That's full, Simo. So today's topic, though, is empathy. Today, this time is the ultimate time for empathy. My name's Urs Koenig. I've been a student of leadership for most of my life as an executive coach, keynote speaker, military peacekeeper, and ultra endurance competitor. As you are all know, I'm joined by Shannon here, who will introduce herself right now. Shannon.
Yeah, thank you so much. And again, it's such a pleasure to be here with Urs each Thursday for the next, starting today, it'll be 5 more, including today. And my name is Shannon Huffman Polson. I also come with some military experience after 8 years in the military as one of the first women to fly the Apache helicopter in the US Army. I served on 3 different continents in line positions, and then transferred through the Tuck School at Dartmouth for an MBA and spent several years in the corporate world as well before taking all of that experience and continuing to really explore leadership. Again, talking to audiences across the country. My book, The Grit Factor, comes out in September, and I'm now the founder of the Grit Institute, which is an online training development platform for people in the middle and upper stages of their leadership development. So a real pleasure to be here with Urs and with all of you. Thanks so much for signing in.
Right. Thank you, Shannon. So today's topic, this is the ultimate time for empathy. We'll talk about 2 main subtopics. The first one is the importance of building and deepening relationships, and the second one around the undervalued leadership skill of listening. So let's dive in. Let's talk about the first one, deepening of relationships. I've talked to many leaders and clients over the last few weeks, and now it's almost a couple of months now, I believe, since this hit. And one of them put it real well. He said, I'm taking the dip in productivity. We're all experiencing right now because we have kids who need homeschooling. My kids are homeschooling right now as we speak in my other couple of bedrooms. We have a partner who's working from home as well. We're stuck at home, we can't leave. I take the dip in productivity any day because this crisis enables me to deepen the relationship with my people. And that, the deepening of the relationships, will pay dividends for the months and years to come. Another leader said, if I don't check in with my direct reports at least once per day, I'm not checking in enough. And remember, last week we talked about the importance of being mission driven, of really thinking about our why. How can we continue to be relevant for our clients? But even if the waters are a bit muddy around our mission, our direction, we can always work on deepening the relationships with our people. So how do we do that? How do we deepen relationships? We ask questions, we listen, we'll talk about that, and we reveal about ourselves. We show up with some vulnerability. I've also been reminded of the value of what I call the BMW session, which I've used during my executive coaching days. What's a BMW session? A BMW session is, I'll give you a minute or 2 at the beginning of our time together to bitch, moan, whine. You can complain about everything and it's everybody else's fault. Let's get the small self out of the way to make room for the bigger self. We can apply the same technique in our one-on-ones, in our chats we have with our direct reports. Shannon, what comes to mind as you hear me talk here?
Yeah, I think this is a really important topic, and it's one that is maybe the most important topic, because as we always said in the Army, it's mission first, people always, right? People are the ones that do the mission. They're the ones that get things done. And so when you take care of your people, they are able to take care of the mission. And that is really, I know, Urs, you and I have talked about this, but there's an element of love in that, right? It's really, and it's something I know you've said that we use in certain contexts and not in others, but it really is about taking care of our people. That's where it should always be focused, but certainly in a time where everybody is experiencing this global pandemic in very different ways, very intensely sometimes, both personally and professionally. There's fear, there's anxiety, and for some, there's just a real focus. Everyone's experiencing it differently. And as leaders, in order to respond to our people, in order to take care of the people who are getting things done, we have to take care of them first. And to take care of them means really spending time in those relationships. I couldn't agree more with that.
You bring up the L word, right? The love word. And yes, I do talk about this. Like as leaders, I really feel we actually have to love our people. And note how the L word is, as you're saying, Shannon, is actually quite frequently used in the military and in competitive sports, less so in business. So why is that? I think it's because when we are experiencing high pressure, sometimes life-threatening situations. I've never been in combat, fortunately, but I've certainly experienced plenty of high-pressure situations in sports. There is a bond forming that only can form. There's a love bond forming that only can form in those high-pressure situations. You know, I will always love and treasure the people who I finished the race across America with. I will always love and treasure the ultra cycling crew, and I think my crew chief Ken is on the call today, who would peel me off the bike during the third sleepless night at 3 a.m. and lie me down by the side of the road for a 5-minute power nap because they were taking care of me. Similarly, I think what's going on right now is with this pressure cooker that we're all experiencing, there is a getting closer to each other, and that's a huge opportunity for us to really get to know our people on a deeper level. And yes, lead with love. I've heard that from many of my leaders, that they said, I'm actually now really finding a new appreciation and yes, even a new love for our people, for my people.
That is wonderful. I think it's in business, I think there is a tendency, because there's a requirement to focus on the bottom line and quarterly earnings. And I think with this kind of a disruption that we're all experiencing right now, there is both the necessity and the opportunity to really work on the foundation of what makes your business run, which is your team, which is your people. And I know I like, Urs, that you mentioned one of your clients that says, I've got to check in every day. And I know as a young lieutenant, I remember when we were flying, you know, the really cool, sexy stuff was flying the Apache and planning the missions and studying the aircraft. But one of the big requirements that I had to learn as a lieutenant was, that's not the only job that I have. It's not even the most important job that I have. I'm responsible for all of the people that fly the aircraft. I'm responsible for all of the crew chiefs that maintain the aircraft. So I had to get out of the company headquarters, out of flight operations, walk down those hangar stairs and go onto the hangar floor into the crew chief office. And I always joke that my crew chief scared me a little bit at first, because they were, you know, young guys, Harley riding, beer drinking, Rage Against the Machine listening young guys. And I was an English major from Duke. So we rarely swapped stories about book clubs. But, you know, I remember walking into the crew chief office that first time and feeling just really out of my element. And I'm sure that the discomfort was felt all around. And picking up a logbook and asking a question about an aircraft. The same applies in an office setting, right? You walk down the hall to an office, or pick up the phone in the environment that we're in now, and just ask a question about what's going on. And gradually starting to develop that relationship, I got to know those guys, and I got to love everyone, because every single one of them uniquely had hopes and dreams and ambitions and desires. And the only way that you can know how to take care of somebody is to know what's important to them, to know who they are as a person, not as just a group of people. And so this is a really unique opportunity. I remember when I was promoted to first lieutenant, my battalion commander said, you know, the only good use of any increased power is the increased responsibility to take care of your people. Well, that's the time that we're in right now. It's the responsibility to take care of our people. It's always the time that we're in, but particularly now there's this really incredible opportunity to deepen those bonds, to get to know people, to find even small ways to take care of them. That really makes all the difference.
So Shannon, that's you were just talking about walking down those hangar stairs, or, you know, we walk down the hallway, or now, as you said, pick up the phone. And and start those conversations. So that actually brings us to the second point, which is really the listening. So we talked about the importance of deepening relationships. So listening. So talk a little bit about this leadership skill that we both believe is undervalued and that we all need to get better at.
Yeah, and this is something in my book, The Grit Factor, in my keynotes, in the training that I do for companies, both online and in person. This is what I think is the single most critical leadership skill. And this has come out of every conversation that I've had with a senior level leader, with a general officer, that is all part of the research for The Grit Factor. But and that is the ability to listen. And it's funny because, last week we talked about some of the more, it's still important, but the more visible aspects of leadership, this audacity and this willing to set a vision and be able to move towards that vision. Those are very, very important things to be able to do as a leader in a time of crisis. But listening, and this is a 360 art and science, is absolutely something that most of us that are good at the audacity, that are good at the moving forward and mission accomplishment, might have some challenges with. I know that I do. I know that's one of my weaknesses. And it starts with recognizing that might be a deficiency, or that it's a place that all of us can get better. And then it starts by really working on some of the various components of that, which we can certainly talk through. But I know you've had some of this experience as well, that listening is the only way that we understand others.
Yeah, and so you talked about, there is some concrete techniques. Let's just talk about those for a few seconds, for a few minutes. So you talked about the pause. So they're giving it some space. So what's that all about?
Yeah, and you have to start, of course, by reaching out, right? You have to start by, whether right now it's picking up the phone, whether it's walking around and meeting your people where they are. I think that's really important, by the way, because it's not just about saying, oh, I'm available, I have an open door policy. It's about meeting your people where they are in the work that they're doing, wherever that is. And right now it's by phone. And by phone and not just by text, I would say too, like make the effort to make that personal contact. And then ask the questions. And Urs, you and I have talked about the importance of, as many of us know, but sometimes forget to practice, an open-ended question. Like, tell me about how things are going. An invitation, really. The ask is an invitation. And then there's this pause, and the pause is hard because, again, we're mission focused, we're vision setters, we know that we have to be audacious in being able to drive and to motivate. But this is not about that. This is about opening a space to receive somebody else, however they are, whatever it is that they need to share, in whatever way they need to share it. And that means not saying anything after you make that initial invitation, pausing. And, there's a class at the Tuck School at Dartmouth when I went back for our 15th reunion. And now I've included this in workshops that I do as well, where you ask a question and then force yourself to say nothing for 90 seconds. It's a long time. That was just a few seconds I waited there, right? It's a long time.
Everybody's getting uncomfortable.
No, I mean, it's a little uncomfortable, but it really does help us to practice and recognize how quickly we jump in. There's a study that shows that, from Harvard, that shows that doctors tend to interrupt their patients in the first 18 seconds that a patient is explaining something. 18 seconds. And I think most of us do that again, tend to be solution oriented. And so that pause is absolutely critical and a very, very challenging thing to practice and to learn and to continue to learn.
And thank you, Angel. Yes, the power of the pause.
Power of the pause, absolutely.
So the pausing, another thing, as we're thinking about listening, and I know a lot of you know about this, and yet again, it's one of those things that's so simple, but it's not always easy to implement, is the paraphrasing. So the person is sharing something and you feed it back to her or him. So what I'm hearing you say is, or what I understand you mean is, yes. And then you're paraphrasing it back. And what we often forget is, for whose benefit are we doing this? We're actually doing this for the benefit of the person who was speaking. Yes, we're checking our own understanding, but when we have somebody else feed back what they heard us saying, it actually helps us to clarify our own thinking. And so that's another sort of good tactic to think about in terms of good listening. And then what also comes to mind is always thinking, for whose benefit am I asking this question? So is it, in coaching, we talk about different levels of listening. So a level 1 listening is, it's just about me. I just want to gather information. It's when a waiter at the restaurant rattles down the menu, you're just listening because you're trying to decide what to eat. You don't really care how the person feels or what they're going to do next. So asking questions for the benefit of the speaker, actually. So asking inquiry questions that help the other person to move to the next level versus just getting the information.
Absolutely. And I think that's so important, because the other thing, and I speak really for myself here, but I think the studies back me up, is, again, for those of us who are in leadership positions or have been in a position where we need to set this vision and move forward, there's a tendency to, while we're listening, we tend to be composing our response, or we tend to be judging what we're hearing. And I know I do that. I do that all the time. I still do that, even with my family. And it's a hard habit to break. And it's really important that paraphrasing allows you to say, am I hearing this correctly? Am I listening to this, receiving this without imposing my own judgment on this? And then and then pause again. After you paraphrase, or after you ask a clarifying question, pause again. And again, opening up that space to let that person show up, to let their message, to let their ideas, to let their hopes or their fears show up in that space, unjudged, uncritiqued, uncorralled by any of our expectations. It's a really hard thing to do, and it's a really important thing to do. And I think that's really, the other part of it that can be hard is when we hear something that we don't want to hear, right? And maybe we're hearing something that's hard to hear for ourselves. And one of the things that I most enjoyed and appreciated from the research over the script factor, looking at listening in particular, and this was actually Brene Brown that brought this up, is she got some pretty tough feedback from her team about how she was doing business. And she realized she needed to say, I'd like to get back to you on that, but really take some time to think about it. Could I get back to you about this tomorrow? And I thought that was really insightful, because there are times that even 90 seconds might not be long enough. It might not, and we might not be in a position to be able to respond well to something that's a really difficult thing to hear. So those are things too. The pause is whatever you need to make it to be in order to really honor whatever it is that other person is bringing to the table. But that is absolutely part of this deepening of relationship, that it's just so critical. And again, it's one of the most critical leadership skills at the highest levels. So I think it's not something we talk about nearly enough, but it's something that I think most senior leaders find to be absolutely indispensable, and frankly, that takes a lot of work.
Excellent. So maybe one tangible takeaway for all of us today is, over the course of the rest of the day, as we're asking a question, let's self-observe. Am I already formulating my response? Am I already trying to get my word in? Or am I actually truly listening and being in the moment of what's coming back from the other person? Something to practice for the rest of the day. So Shannon, we're sort of coming up on the 20 minutes. Anything before I close it out here?
This has been a great conversation. I think we can't talk enough about taking care of people and really practicing the art and the science of listening. Urs, I am so glad that we made this the topic for today, and I hope many of you have something to take away that you'll be able to bring into your own lives.
Excellent. So let us close with one small thing here. We talked about this is the ultimate time for empathy, deepening of relationships, the importance of listening. Months and years from now, we will hire again. Believe it or not, you will be hiring again. And the job candidates will ask you this question: how did you and your organization respond to the COVID-19 crisis? How did you and your organization respond to the COVID-19 crisis? What message around empathy, around deepening of relationships, around listening do you want to convey to that job candidate? Thanks for joining in. We will all see you next Thursday. Stay healthy and stay safe. Bye.
Bye-bye.